It's on the ground, still in Clemson's hands, and now it is down. It is over. Second interception of this fourth quarter by the Hoosiers. And with 5:05 left, they've got the ball in a 17-point lead.
And the Florida Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs in Jacksonville.
Welcome to The Review with your hosts John Nelson, John Wilkerson, John Wood, and Phil Cantor.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. I am OSG Phil. I'm back after being gone last week. With me as always, OSG Nelson, OSG J-Dub, and Jay Wilkerson 16. We are four of the Online Sports Guys, and we're talking about the week that was in college football. And guys, it was kind of an interesting set of games on Saturday. Some teams at the top kind of changing hands and jockeying for position. What game did the same game jump out to you that jumped out to me, which would be Clemson at Notre Dame? A little bit of a surprise there for you?
8 points you leave on the table against a great team. Oh, on the toss, it's in the hands of Owusu Karamoa, who will score!
I think, I don't want to speak for Nelson, but it brings back memories of when number one Florida State went into the house that Rockne built and lost. So it was that level of a game for me.
It was 1 versus 4, and whoever the new commissioner of the ACC is going to be needs to mortgage the farm, do whatever he has to do to get Notre Dame to stay for more than 1 year.
Yeah.
Because this type of game is exactly what the ACC needs, because Florida State is not going to be that team that can challenge Clemson right now. And really, North Carolina is the only program that has any kind of fan base that can challenge Clemson, because everybody else is who they are. And
maybe Miami if they come back. And
I don't have any confidence in that happening either. Virginia Tech should be, but I don't care how you appease NBC. Get rid of the ACC network or turn it into a YouTube channel and put some games on NBC. It'd be better to diversify your media anyway. But they've got to do whatever they need to get Notre Dame to be in the football in the football conference there at the ACC. This, to me, just solidified why Notre Dame needs to be in the conference for football.
Brother John, that was a performance by Notre Dame, wasn't it?
Yeah, as much as I'm going to begrudgingly admit it, I still think that I was looking at the Ian Book that fumbled into the end zone, and I'm going, that's the Ian Book that I know. No, I can't say it. I cannot give Notre Dame any credit. I just can't. I cannot give them any credit at all, considering the incident that J-Dub just mentioned. So I will tip my hat to the team that won. I will congratulate them for having a 35-minute overtime that pushed Saturday Night Live back to past midnight in the Eastern time zone.
Truth.
And once again, I look at Clemson. You had Clemson dropping to 4 in the AP. But once again, I think that looking at that from the Clemson perspective, I look at what we saw from DJ Uiagalelei as a quarterback, just basically in his second start, throwing for over 400 yards. So the offense at Clemson, we know they're going to do some great things. I think that the defense is what's going to have to be shored up between now and getting to make sure that you stay in the CFP. So that team in South Bend, I can't quite say their name, and I can't quite sit there and go, you did well. I can't do it, considering that game that J-Dub mentioned. I just can't. Can't.
And I'm sorry to bring that up, but that's the level of game. I mean, I was watching it, the fanfare, the fans rushing the field after the game. And it's like I got that same feeling watching that the other game. But I want to disagree with Wilkie on something. The only way North Carolina competes with Clemson is on paper. On the field, there is no competition.
But right now, I think they're probably the only one that could do it, and they're not playing this year. But I totally get your point. My point is the ACC needs something like this.
Absolutely.
They haven't had this since Florida State has had their issues, and they were in the same division. And you just don't. This is where the Big Ten and the SEC have over the ACC, and the most important sport that makes all the money is that they have compelling matchups every week. And the ACC has always struggled to have those compelling matchups every week. Oh, who's Clemson playing? Okay, there's your compelling matchup. Oh, they're playing Boston College. Okay, maybe I'll watch a quarter or two. You're not going to be locked in. And
who's going to go see North Carolina State and Duke play outside of the people in that area?
Exactly. Now, for Clemson in this game, first of all, you discovered in 2 games, well, maybe a game and a half. I'm not going to count the first half of Boston College.
Right.
That you've got a starting quarterback for the future.
Yep.
And that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what Trevor Lawrence decides to go pro, you've got DJU is your guy, and you've got to feel comfortable about that.
Well done.
Exactly. Number 2, you've got some really good number 2 and number 3 players.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned the defense, John. They had some injuries on that side of the ball as well, very similar to the Georgia, but they've built that depth. And I really think Brent Venables is that good of a defensive coordinator. Where they're soft was obviously in the middle, and that secondary has always been somewhat of a suspect area.
Mm-hmm.
They've gotten by with that because that front 7 is so good.
Yeah.
So if I'm a Clemson fan, I'm disappointed we lost, but I'm kind of feeling good about what's coming up down the pike in the next few years. You just got to hope that Dabo doesn't take the Atlanta Falcons job or any other NFL job.
Okay, now I give
Jets.
No. I give Wilkie full credit for doing the short version of DJ Uiagalelei. I love the fact that you went to just and so now is Death Valley DJU after Trevor leaves? Is that what we're going to call it?
I think I can't take full credit for that. I got to give full credit to Chris Mooneyham from 680 The Fan, who we had on the X last week. He's the one that came up with it. I'll give him full credit.
Hey, it works for me.
It's an excellent dodge for play-by-play guys and color guys and studio guys all around the planet to just sit there and go, yeah, DJU with a touchdown pass.
I'm just happy Don Munson has mastered that, the voice of the Clemson Tigers, because I don't need to.
No, but there were some moments where you had DJU going up against some polysyllabic names for Notre Dame, and there were some tackles, and
that was Mike Tirico's problem.
Yes, and I give Tirico full credit for mastering all of that polysyllabic word salad that he had to get through when you had multi hyphenated names tackling DJU. Mike Tirico gets an A+ for
we're dancing. We're going to see round 2 in about 5 weeks here.
Yeah,
guys.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think so.
I think Clemson, you're talking about losses on defense. I think losing Skalski is when they did. I mean, he was the quarterback of that defense. That's a huge thing. And Boston College exploited that defense last week. Notre Dame did the exact same thing. Thank you, film study. So the defense at Clemson is suspect. It's weak. It's exploitable. I think Brent Venables is a mastermind, but he's got to find some better pieces on the chessboard.
I agree. And I think if Notre Dame's going to have a hiccup, and we'll probably talk about it later in the show, but next week could be that hiccup.
Crap game.
Yep. And props to Brian Kelly for having his guys ready to go. Big win. A little disconcerting seeing all the people running out onto the field after the game. And
I loved it.
Didn't realize how many people were actually in the stands. It looked like
10 or 11,000 were there. So no, it's but I still, just on premise, I cannot give that coach at that university any credit. No,
still too soon.
Not happening.
The other big highlight game this week, the one that drew most of the national attention, the annual Georgia-Florida game.
And come on! Just call it what it is.
The world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Thank you.
I had to write copy on that for 10 years. I had to call it Georgia and Florida.
Hashtag WLOCP. It had its own hashtag this past week.
Yeah, but in the TV world, we're not allowed to call it that, so we don't. Either way, Anyway, and plus you didn't have it this year because most of the fans couldn't go.
No, you had it because Georgia fans were drinking their butts off at home after after they got completely railroaded by the Gators.
There were cocktail parties. There were cocktail parties going on all over Georgia and Florida before the game. Right. There's just one that continued after the game. Well, maybe more continued after the game.
Yeah, I was going to say
one half was more on a happy mood.
Yes,
most of the people I know were drinking before, during, middle, and after.
Yes.
And when they got up in the morning.
Yes.
Now here's Trask on play action, throws it down the left sideline. Got a wide open receiver. It's Kamori Gamble. It's a touchdown.
Big win by the Gators. Kyle Trask looked absolutely outstanding. Just shredded the Georgia defense. An impressive performance all the way around on offense, and it wasn't just the Trask to Kyle Pitts combination because Pitts went out early in the game with an injury.
Yep.
He spread the ball around to everybody, and everybody on that offense made plays.
This is not the outcome I expected when I saw Zamir White run the distance on the first play of the game. No. And hats off to Florida. I mean, where is Kyle Trask now in the Heisman? Because I think he's got to be in a short list of Heisman candidates right now for the performances, doing that on national TV in a rivalry game.
What does he have, like 20-something touchdowns in 4 games or 5 games?
Something like that. I mean, he threw for 4 yesterday, 474. 30 for 43, 1 interception. I've got to say he's got to be up there on the short list.
You got to think about I think the top 3 you're going to have Kyle Trask. I think you have to talk about Travis Etienne in there for Heisman. Okay. But right now, I think who's leading it, and I hate to say it, I think Mac Jones from Alabama is. He's got like 2,300 yards passing. I think now, depending on how they were in the season, but I think Kyle Trask put a bug in the Heisman voters' ears yesterday, saying, "I am worthy of this," and I think that was a statement game against a pro-style defense on national television.
He's still got to get by Justin Fields of Ohio State too, but that's a conversation for later in the show. The Gators look really good, and quite honestly, outside of the Zamir White touchdown run at the beginning of the game and the breakdown in coverage where Georgia scored, the Florida defense held them really well. Georgia got an interception return for a touchdown for their 3rd touchdown in the game, and that was it.
But when you have going up against an offense that has all sorts of quarterback issues, your defense is going to look like the Steelers of the 70s.
Yep.
I mean, your best backup was DeJuan Mathis, and he has severe limitations right now.
Yeah.
And Stetson Bennett, I mean, he was serviceable but I don't know what the injury was. Obviously, it was a shoulder issue. Separated shoulder. That's right.
Yeah.
So he's playing with a wounded wing. And that just showed how fragile that position can be when you don't have a quarterback in place. It'd be interesting what the JT Daniels situation is, because it's almost as if he's the only one that has any kind of experience, and he's got the skill set. You got to put him in.
Well, but there's also the discussion, though, that he hasn't fully recovered from the knee injury, and that's why he's not a part of the discussion right now being put in for Georgia at quarterback, though.
I'm sure that's the big reason why. But I'm sure Georgia fans are wondering, why not?
Where is he?
Among other things, yes, they are.
But I wouldn't give up on. I mean, we talked about before we start taping about people going for Kirby's head.
Yeah.
I'm just not there yet.
No,
I mean,
no.
2020 is a write-off by and large. Some teams are going to have some success. Some of them aren't. And there's not really a whole lot of control that coaches can have over it.
But my thing is, I'm not as worried about Kirby's job, because Kirby's a hell of a recruiter. I'm worried about the offensive coordinator.
He just got there.
I'm saying, but what is he doing? What can he fix? What is the rapport with the running backs and the quarterbacks? What type of relationship does Monken have?
If you watch the game, Georgia had receivers open all day long, and they were down 2 of their top 4 wide receivers, and they still had guys getting open. The quarterbacks couldn't get them the ball. They were either overthrown, underthrown, or just wildly off target. I've watched at least one pass Bennett threw that was to a receiver who had a step on an inside drag route. And not only was the ball behind him, it was so far behind him that the defender that was 3 steps behind the wide receiver caught the ball right in his gut.
There was some of those missed throws too. Some of those openings were in the soft part of the zones as well. Mm-hmm. But you got to recognize that as a quarterback. And, that's kind of where Georgia is. That's, again, how fragile that position is. And obviously, Georgia's got to shore up that part. I mean, and I thought Florida did a great job of getting a pass rush on and disrupting the rhythm of Georgia's offense.
Good game plan.
They got to figure some out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't say anything. I can't say anything positive about the University of South Georgia Gainesville campus anyway. So I'll leave that to you guys.
I'm just, as someone who's a Tennessee fan who's been in the SEC East, knowing that this game was going to be indicative of who's going to win the East, because no one else in the division is competitive. And you look at, and we talked about last week on the X about Michigan hired Jim Harbaugh. We'll talk about him later, to win the big games against Ohio State and Michigan State. Same with Kirby Smart. He was hired to win the big games against Alabama and Florida. That's not happening. So, are we calling for his job now? Maybe not so much. But down the road, these losses in big games like this are going to come back to haunt him. And he's got to figure out a way, whether it be coaching staff or whether it be offensive or defensive pieces. He's got so many. How many 5-star recruits can a man recruit and still have 0 national championships to talk about? I mean, I think
for the record, 3-1 against Florida, but he's 0-4 against Saban.
Yeah. So, I mean, these things these things add up collectively as far as the body of work is concerned for a coach, especially in a football conference like the SEC.
He's a Saban assistant. He signed a letter that he can't beat Saban in a head-to-head.
Yes. Saban teaches you just enough to do well against everybody else but him.
Yep. It may or may not be true that there's some sort of blood oath involved.
Well, and Saban's blood oath has blood off. But no, and Saban's has to do with much like Bobby Bowden, recruiting kickers and then scheming outside the box when it comes to games of national importance.
Yep. Speaking of games of national importance, we still got a couple of undefeated teams. Yes, that's my job to steer the ship. There's a couple of undefeated teams out there that we've talked about a couple of times here on this show, and all 4 of us really like what they've been doing this season, and that's both Cincinnati and BYU. BYU, the first team in the nation to go 8-0, a huge win this week against Boise State in a battle of 2 teams that were also ranked at the beginning of the season.
Snap to Zach. Zach play fake. 5-step drop. He throws on the end to Rex. Another touchdown catch for Rex.
And can't say enough about how impressive the Cougars have been this year.
I absolutely love Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is one of my favorite quarterbacks that's flying under everyone's radar. I mean, he threw for 359 yesterday and 2 touchdowns, had a QBR over 90. I just love the way they're playing him. Tyler Allgeier is great on the ground, and we've talked a lot about the last few weeks about the quarterback-running back tandems. I just absolutely love the Cougars. I mean, they are my dark horse pick to have a shot at the top 4.
No, I'm right there with you. The thing that shocked me was the number that they put up on Boise in general. Yeah. I did not anticipate that margin being what the margin was. So for me, as we look at the AP, BYU moves up 1, and they're kind of in that zone right now at number 8. And Cincinnati's only 5 points behind Florida at number 6, 15 points behind Texas A&M at number 5. So Wilkie, I think that race from 7 up is going to be the fun part.
Well, as I've mentioned throughout, if Cincinnati is going to break in and be that group of 5 that breaks into the Final Four, they're going to have to win and win impressively. And I thought they did that against Houston. Actually, I watched a little bit of that game yesterday, and I'm really impressed with Desmond Ridder. I mean, what a fine quarterback he is. Heck of an athlete. He runs that engine, but for Cincinnati to win, they've got to run up scores like they did against Houston yesterday, and they got to win impressively. I mean, only allowing Houston 10 points was huge. And so that's the only avenue I see with Cincinnati. And if it's going to become between Cincinnati and BYU is going to get the nod simply because you guys know as well as I do in college football, teams that have a reputation are going to get the nod. And BYU has a national title under their belt in '84. And they've always national profile. How many NFL guys have they put in, especially quarterbacks?
Yep.
So they've got the name recognition, and they do carry a pretty good fan base as well, which I think plays into this whole scenario. So my edge goes to BYU.
And if you think about it, talking about the power of the American Conference or lack thereof, Cincinnati's impressive win over Houston, and they drop a spot in the AP. So that to me is a thumb at the nose at you saying, yeah, you won convincingly. Yeah, you're undefeated, but yeah, we're going to put somebody over top of you. That spoke volumes to me as far as I wouldn't necessarily say lack of respect for the non-Power Fives, but it's definitely not a sign of we recognize how powerful a program you are.
And I think the eye test is part of this as well, because when you watch Cincinnati, they're the personality of Luke Fickell. I mean, very matter-of-factly, very physical, not very sexy out there. BYU, they'll toss it around out there. Zach Wilson is one of the dynamic quarterbacks, and they've got a slew of receivers and running backs that half the names you can't pronounce.
Yep.
But they just do some such great things visually out there, and all directions point to BYU.
Yeah, and you look at Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder had a $180 on in the air yesterday, and also ran. No, he ran for 100 yards. Garrett Dokes also ran for like 183 yards. But he's got a QBR this year of 83.9, right? Almost 1,200 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, and 6 picks. I mean, the guy's a great athlete overall.
Ridder, who is under pressure, takes it down and scores.
Needs to learn how to make a few better decisions back there. Some of his interceptions have been like, what were you thinking? But at the same time, you compare a Desmond Ridder against a Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson's takes that matchup every day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see either one of them play the Florida Gators this year because I think both of them would have a chance. Speaking of SEC teams, one team in the top 10 we haven't really talked about, and John probably will bail out of this conversation really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the Texas A&M Aggies, who just stomped a mud hole in South Carolina.
Well, and this is the larger question, and I'm putting the question about this is not a question about the quitter, so I'm putting the quitter over to one side.
Thank you.
When it comes to Will Muschamp, does he get a pass? Does he get a pass this season, or is this it for him, guys?
How many passes has he had in Columbia? I mean, come on.
I think Will Muschamp is what he is at this point. I don't know that he's the guy that's going to get South Carolina any further than he currently has. Whether they pull the plug or not probably is going to depend a little on his contract situation.
Well, I think there's going to be deep pockets out there that'll take care of that. It's just whether they can get Hugh Freeze out of Liberty. I think that's the shiny object that every SEC program wants right now, because they're seeing what Hugh Freeze is doing at Liberty right now, especially after the win over Virginia Tech. And I mean, he's on everybody's short list now in the SEC. Him and Billy Napier, to me, are the two that if there's going to be a move made in the SEC, those are the two guys that are going to be targeted.
But you look at South Carolina. South Carolina started the year off with a loss to a not good Tennessee team. Then Florida, put 38 on them. Then they beat Vandy, right? And
everybody beat Vandy.
Yeah, and I won't talk about the next one.
Four of us could be Vandy,
right? But then LSU drops 52 on them, and then TAMU drops 48 on them in 2 weeks in a row. I mean, they're going into the lane train, next week. I think the rest of this schedule, they got Mizzou, then Georgia, and then Kentucky the rest of the season. It's conceivable that they don't win another game this year. And I mean, the purist in me understands that, COVID, you're kind of stunted in what you can do and what you have done. No preseason, no fall ball. I understand that. But there has to be some kind of reckoning in Columbia. Has to be some kind of reckoning in Nashville. There has to be some kind of reckoning in Knoxville. Some of these places where coaches have all these, aspirations and backgrounds and have 0 wins to prove for it. And I don't know how many more times Muschamp can be given a pass, because he literally, I hate to say Mark Richt, because Mark Richt was like that average coach who would not go above that 8-8, right?
Yeah.
And like how much more cushion does he get? I mean, the boosters in Columbia must not be happy right now.
Well, here's what is the telltale sign for me that the move will be made on Muschamp. Obviously, the school up the road, up the upstate in Clemson has 2 national titles and #1 and yeah, I mean they've beaten South Carolina the last few years on the rivalry game. They don't
look
play
at
this
Coastal
year.
Carolina.
That's my next point. Coastal Carolina is now undefeated, grabbing some headlines, and the flagship university in Columbia is getting the back page.
Yeah.
I think that is going to be the death nail for Will Muschamp, is the success of Coastal Carolina. They're getting all the pub, and not necessarily going to compete against recruits, but hey, they're the new sexy thing in South Carolina, so that's got to change.
And one last game I want to get to here before we wrap up the first half of the show, and that's a game involving the Indiana Hoosiers, who have one of my favorite coaches, and a guy who I think could very well be the coach of the year if it doesn't go to Sam Pittman, and that's Tom Lewis at Indiana.
Yeah.
Bravo to them. A huge win over Michigan in a game that really wasn't even as close as the score indicated.
Free play, and so an end zone shot. Up top, and touchdown.
He's got Michael Penix Jr. playing like an All-American. Football finally has arrived in Bloomington, Indiana, after how many decades of futility?
Well, we remember we had Don Fisher, the voice of the Indiana Hoosiers, on the X a couple of weeks ago. He said something to me after the interview that made a lot of sense to me about Indiana football. Is every time there's because they've been involved in so many close games, but anytime something that's either kind of controversial or a close call always goes against Indiana. And it seems like the tide has turned this year. Now, yes, there's great players there, and you mentioned one of Michael Penix Jr., and I like kind of the receiving core they have there too. But things are turning to Indiana's way, and I think that's a big reason why the Hoosiers are undefeated right now, and really the feel-good story in Big Ten.
And I look at Indiana's defense, right? Michigan had 6 running backs touch the ball yesterday, and the most yards on the ground was 19. It was 19, 5, 4, -3, -3, and -9. So you got to give credit to Indiana's front 6 doing really well with that. They picked off Joe Milton twice. I think the unsung hero in this, because Penix and Scott are great quarterback running back tandem, but I think Indiana's defense is quietly the most important part of that team.
And look at it right now with the AP poll the way that it is. The highest ranked team in the Big 10, 12, 14 outside of Ohio State, who is heading, we anticipate them heading to the CFP. The highest ranked Big 10, 12, 14 team right now is Indiana. So Indiana would be heading to the highest rated bowl game for the Big 10, 12, 14, not involving the CFP on New Year's Day right now.
And when's the last time you've seen the Michigans or the Penn States, all of these guys not in the AP top 25? It just looks weird to me without that.
Well, when you've got receivers by the name of Whop Philyor and Ty Freifogel, you gotta love them. Those are their top 2 receivers.
Whop and Ty?
And don't forget Peyton Hendershot.
Exactly. But Indiana's got Ohio State in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
I think that's appointment television.
Yeah.
Where is that game
being played? That might be the game of the year in the Big Ten.
That's at the Horseshoe.
Oh, so it's at the Horseshoe? Oof. That'll be a good game.
Yep.
If anybody's going to give Ohio State any kind of a push this season in the Big Ten, I think that's going to be it. If you look at Ohio State's schedule at this point, they really haven't been pushed that hard. They beat Rutgers 49-27 in a game they led big until kind of the end.
Yeah.
Garbage time.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Field has just been out of his mind so far this season. This past game, he went 24 for 28, 314, and 5 touchdown passes as Ohio State dropped 49 on Rutgers.
Go ahead, John.
I was just saying. No, I was just which John? There's 3 of us.
You, J-Dub.
We've said the whole time that Ohio State's playing with a chip on their shoulder because they started the season late. Justin Fields is legitimate, a Heisman candidate. He has to have a statement game every single game going down the stretch because they're only playing, 8 games? So he's got a short amount of time to prove how important he is to that Heisman trophy. And, man, did he just put it on the Scarlet Knights yesterday. That was insane.
But in the Big Ten Conference, do not sleep on Northwestern. They have been impressive in their first 3 games, the Fighting Fitzgeralds.
There you go.
And they avoid Ohio State. They avoid Indiana. They got Wisconsin on the schedule, but will that game be played? We don't know. So Northwestern could run the table as well. And that Indiana-Ohio State game in a few weeks could be an elimination game for the Big Ten title.
Yeah, because Northwestern just beat Nebraska. I mean, they led that game throughout. And you got to look at Peyton Ramsey. Peyton Ramsey's a serviceable quarterback. He's not going to he's not going to be that game winner for you, but he's not going to turn the ball over either. So I agree with you. I think Northwestern could play dark horse here.
Yeah, beating Nebraska this year has not been that big of a challenge. The Cornhuskers are
not good.
They're 0-2. Northwestern leading the Big Ten West right now at 3-0 with Purdue right behind them, nipping at their heels at 2-0. We could potentially see a Northwestern versus Ohio State Big Ten championship game. Wouldn't that be something?
and let's see, this week it's Northwestern at Purdue.
I think that's a good game.
Look at you.
But since we're in the Big 10, 12-14, what in the hell is happening in Happy Valley? What is going on with the Nittany Lions? I'm watching this going, talking about wheels falling off the cart. They don't even have axles at this point. It's just, what is happening?
It's like the car that's been in the car chase that you're watching on television, and the guy is still driving. The tire's off. He's on the rim. The rim goes off. He's on the axle, and all you see are the sparks coming out of the rear axle after he's gone, on the rumble strips from the cops, the spike strips. That's what you're looking at right now with Penn State. It is not a pretty picture.
Well, I think the wind. What's the phrase I'm looking for? I think all their momentum for this season died in Bloomington, Indiana.
Yeah.
And they couldn't recover against Ohio State.
Yeah.
And obviously this is a program that is reeling right now. We're talking, people talking about Jim Harbaugh and whether his time has come in Michigan and, James Franklin. I mean, how popular is he in Happy Valley right now? Has he not delivered on the promises because I think he's an outstanding head coach. Anybody can get Vanderbilt to 9 wins. He's got some skills, but he's more of a recruiting type of guy. He's not really the X and O's type. And it's almost as if you need that type of X and O's coach at Penn State to succeed, especially in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you look at Sean Clifford yesterday, his QBR was 29.5.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and because Tagovailoa had a good game. Jake Funk brought the noise into Funk again, 80 yards and a touchdown. Maryland's
gotten into Maryland.
Maryland's got some momentum behind them right now.
I have no idea.
I mean, it's
I
insane.
have no clue about Maryland right now, other than saying to Talia Tagovailoa. See, that was Talia Tagovailoa. You let him run, and you're seeing that offense just go, and they're putting up yards and points.
But how important is that first loss against Northwestern at the beginning of the year? I mean, that's going to bode problems for Maryland down the stretch as far as records are concerned.
Well, I have a feeling when Ohio State comes to College Park that things might get corrected. Because I'm thinking the ghost of Bobby Ross is out there coaching right now. The Terps and not Mike Loxley, but we'll see.
Well, guys, what do you say we go to halftime here? We've been at it here a good bit. We got a bunch of stuff still to discuss here in the second half of the show. But as we go into the halftime break, when we come back, we will talk about the teal turf and Coastal Carolina, one of my favorite undefeated teams as well. That and all the news that is fit to print in the world of college football when we hit the second half of the review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Slovis looking, fires, it's out! Touchdown, Drake London!
Thanks for sticking around, folks. You have made it to the second half of the review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast, where we talk about the week that was in college football. First half of the show, you got to hear about all the big boys, the big games, the big wins. Now we get to talk about some of the games that made us happy to see, the games that were a good laugh, and you just kind of sit there and go, I like it when this happens.
So obviously this means that Pitt and Florida State will not be in this block.
Probably not.
Good.
Except the laughter part. The laughter part they might.
Yeah, for y'all.
The first game that jumped out to me, Liberty gets the win over Virginia Tech after.
How do you jinx yourself?
I was going to say Justin Fuente somehow managed to outsmart himself.
I blame the X bump.
Easy to do.
The X bump gave Liberty the push over that. Yeah, granted, maybe it helped jinx Virginia Tech at the same time, but hey, had Nick Pierce on the X. It was great to see Liberty at least play well, and I will agree, Fuentes. I'm not sure exactly what happened there.
This one is up. Does it have the distance? It does! With 1 second remaining on the clock, Barbier puts the Flames up in Blacksburg.
Excuse me, I'm not even sure he could explain it. Liberty gets the win. 38-35. The Flames ranked for the first time, I think, pretty much in their history.
Yeah, in the FBS era is the first time they're ranked, and they actually jumped. They jumped 3 spots to 22 this week.
I don't pretend to understand what's going on, but Wilkie mentioned it earlier in the show. The biggest storyline out of the whole season for the Flames is probably going to be that Hugh Freeze is now a highly sought-after coaching candidate again.
Absolutely. I mean, I can tell you that talking to Nick Pierce on the X, they love Hugh Freeze. They love what he brings to the table. They love the character he brings to the locker room. He's won every single place he's been, and Liberty understands how happy they are and how lucky they are to have a coach of the caliber of a Hugh Freeze, because Liberty's always had a successful football program where they've come from, leaving the Big South, becoming independent. I think, if I'm not badly mistaken, all the rest of their sports are in the A-Sun. But I think they understand how lucky they are to have Freeze. But I agree, some of these big schools were going to become calling, because Liberty not only is building on the success they've had, they are taking a quarterback like a Hendon Hooker, and they are just running through everybody. I think, Liberty, Coastal Carolina, end of the year is going to be a massive game.
Ooh, it's going to be a fun one. And, I did mention about Hugh Freeze being a hot coaching commodity, especially in the SEC. I think it's going to have to be a really great offer and a great program to pry him out of Lynchburg, because I think he's content and happy there after rehabbing his coaching career. Why go chase after the large check when it's just not a good fit? or the school has so many issues right now that he can't even solve.
Mm-hmm.
He's happy and content right now in Lynchburg, and I could see him staying there for another few years, maybe 5 or 6 years, because the right offer, and doesn't necessarily have to be an SEC school. It could be an ACC or Big Ten or something along those lines, or Big 12. And the other thing too is a few weeks, J-Dub, they've got NC State in Raleigh.
Yep.
Which now, boy, just thinking how confident Liberty team's going to be going into Carter Finley.
They may be favored in that game.
They may be favored. Yep. And then, the Coastal game, that is appointment television.
Yep.
And I really think the four of us are the only ones that get it right now.
I want to jump in and correct myself. I mentioned the quarterback in Liberty. I mentioned
Malik Willis, Roswell High School.
It's Malik Willis out of Roswell High School. I'm sorry, Malik. I got that wrong. Malik Willis is a completely off the chart athlete. Led the team in passing and rushing yesterday. My apologies, Malik. Got to represent Roswell High School the right way. So I'm going to jump in and correct that. So my apologies.
Speaking of Coastal Carolina, big win for the Chanticleers, 23 to 6 over South Alabama. Not the best offensive performance that they've had all season long, but it moves them to 7-0, 5-0 in the Sun Belt. And Coastal Carolina, guys, was ranked 15th in the country going into this game.
Still 15th.
The Fun Belt, man. Got to give mad credit, mad props to the Fun Belt this year. Teams like Georgia State, Louisiana Lafayette. You got Georgia Southern, App State. I mean, that's been a really fun conference to watch.
But and this is a point, Wilkie, that you made early on here in the season. The Fun Belt took advantage of their opportunity to be seen on the national stage. Mm-hmm. I think that if this was a quote-unquote normal year, if we were 2019, 2018, something like that, and you had a team like Liberty, who's a Division I independent, you had a team like Coastal Carolina in the Fun Belt, who, they got a big win early against Kansas on national television.
Thanks for that.
But here's my point. Because of how wild this year is under normal circumstances, I don't think we would be spending as much time talking about a Liberty, having Nick on the X twice, talking to Coastal Carolina, having their play-by-play guys on, telling those stories and being at the forefront of it. I think that in a normal college football season, sadly, we wouldn't be talking as much about the Fun Belt or the Indies, but because of the situation that we're in right now, the Fun Belt, Wilkie, took advantage of this opportunity to get on the national stage early, and they stayed in the public consciousness of college football all season long.
And what has also helped, too, is that has lingered into November with the Pac-12 coming back and the Big Ten coming back. And, you kind of figured that'd be kind of off the radar screen when those conferences came back. And a little, in some ways, they've kind of gone back to the byways of college football. However, they're ranked very high right now. Coastal is 15th now?
Yeah, 15th.
They're all got staying power in the AP poll, which I don't think would have happened if it was a quote normal year, a 2018, a 2019. So they've won in that regard. And the other thing is, people are talking about why can't they be in the Final Four? Why can't a BYU be there? Why can't a Cincinnati be there? The American has kind of had the monopoly on the group of fives because they have a national TV contract, and they're not relegated to ESPN Plus or whatever.
They're the Players' Championship of college football.
Yeah. And they're not. Their games aren't necessary. I mean,
that's a golf reference.
Exception of the American, everybody else is behind the paywall. On streaming, which is kind of a punishment. But when the Sun Belt actually started winning in week 1, notice that most of their games are on the U and 2 and ESPN News, not necessarily behind the paywall all the time.
Yeah.
So I think those are some tidbits that have really helped those conferences right now, that they have some staying power.
And speaking of staying power, I mean, we would be remiss to not talk about the impact that a coach like Jamie Chadwell has had on the Chanticleers. Joe Mowgli has stepped down. They were really, really, really bad last year. Chadwell, who had success at Charleston Southern with the Buccaneers in the Big South, has come in and really turned that program around in a year. And look to see where they've come from last year to this year. I mean, I give Chadwell all the props in the world. The Fun Belt has been absolutely my favorite conference to watch this year. They've just been the stories, like Nelson said earlier, have been some really good stories coming out of that conference, and they have just put everybody on notice that, hey, we're legit.
Yes, we talked a little bit earlier and mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation there about the return of the Pac-12. The best team, or the team highest ranked in the Pac-12, that would be the Oregon Ducks, and they got their season kicked off against Stanford, a 35-14 win for Oregon. And realistically, for me at least, I think Oregon, if the Pac-12 has even the remotest of shots of getting anybody into the college football playoff, I think Oregon's going to be that team.
But Oregon has the same parameters that Cincinnati has if they're going to be that team. And they have to win, and they have to win impressively. Yep. And they only have 6 games to do that, to show themselves off. And, when you look at their schedule, probably the Cal game in Berkeley is the one that could – they have to, because Cal's pretty good. They've got to win that one impressively. And then the rivalry game against Washington before they go with the this is what kills me about the Pac-12. The last week is kind of a mishmash. You don't know who you're going to play until that week, which could be interesting. But they need to win by at least 3 touchdowns on every game and have some kind of impressive performance by somebody, whether it's a running back, a wide receiver, a kick returner, that makes the highlight reel. That's the only way I see Oregon doing that. And let me just say this: Mario Cristobal is doing the right thing at Oregon. Look how impressive the interior line is by Oregon. How many Pac-12 teams do you know have that kind of size and kind of attention to that side of the ball? That's why the SEC is so successful, and the Big Ten.
Yeah, and his time on this side of the Mississippi, I think, has led him to that idea and convert it to Oregon.
And he came from the Miami program that emphasized that as well. That is why the Pac-12 has been awful for the last 20 years. And he recognizes that. He's bringing that to Oregon. I really think Oregon is going to be the gold standard program in the Pac-12 for years to come if everything goes well for Mario Cristobal in that philosophy. And I think it will.
And my question mark with Oregon is who's going to be the heir apparent to Justin Herbert, right? Tyler Shuff came out, had a serviceable day. It helped that the toner was out of ink, right? That Jet Toner missed 4 field goals for the Cardinal. But,
I read that. I wasn't going to go there.
I had to. I'm like, I saw this the most creative headline ever. But I agree that Cristobal is doing the right thing in Oregon. I think Kansas has a better shot at making the CFP than Oregon does. There's no shot.
You're probably right.
The only thing that you could compare Kansas and Oregon to is that they both play in Power 5 conferences.
But still, Oregon, the Pac-12 doesn't have a shot of getting anybody in the CFP unless major programs fail between now and then. Not a shot.
That remains
rash of injuries and
buses break down and you can't get like the locks are busted in the dorms and you can't get out of the dorm room. You're locked in.
They're good. Oregon's a good team. USC, eked out a win.
No matter what, any Pac-12 team that has a winning record will be in a bowl game. Kansas will not be in a bowl game.
Yeah, that's true. But that win by Southern Cal,
yes,
that was important for the Pac-12 because that's the gold standard program, right? It always has been in the Pac-12. They're in LA. They're still relevant in LA, which is huge. Yep. And the fact that they came back and you got Keaton Slovis, who's one of the top, a household name as far as quarterbacks in college football. And you played it at 9 a.m., which was kind of genius, if you ask me, by the Pac-12 to get their people noticed.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any ill effects of a 9 a.m. game. You know, if J-Dub, you can mention this more because you played football on the major college level, but if you were done by 12:30 after playing a 9 o'clock game and you had the rest of the day to yourself, that's not a bad thing.
I would have killed for that instead of having these 4:30 starts or 1:30 starts, right? Occasional ACC with a 12:30 start. I would have loved to have been done at 12:30. And you look at Keaton. You brought up Slovis's name. Dude threw 55 times against Arizona State. 55 times.
Not tailback you anymore.
No. It is not tailback you in USC anymore.
I mean, why not? And think about it. When we were kids growing up, when you would go out to on Saturday morning, you'd go out to wherever the fields were where you were playing your games every week, and chances are you were playing in a morning game.
Yeah.
The idea and premise of doing that's not that unheard of. It isn't this TV era of major college football, but I guess it's a different conversation.
I just think of the fans too, because, well, I think the West Coast fans are going to have to get used to it. I was used to it when I lived out west, and the games kicked off at 9, and my roommates are joking at me because I'm watching a Vanderbilt Georgia game at 9 a.m. and they just didn't understand the Southern football culture, and I pity them for that.
And living on the West Coast, when I was in Spokane, Washington for 3 years, it was really nice to have that early slate of games first thing in the morning. I wake up, have my breakfast, and I'm watching major college football. It was wonderful. But yeah, I thought it was genius to have that game scheduled. But I will have to say, beating Arizona State by 1 point, not an impressive win, not a statement win, but it was still important for the Pac-12 to get started off on that foot.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're kind of gone through most of the games. We've talked about some of the big highlights and things that have happened. The conversation now shifts as we're getting towards the point where we're going to start seeing college football playoff predictions and
playoffs,
things like that. Well, dude, we're 5 weeks out from the end of the season. Who's
already
looking like the teams that are going to be in that final consideration for the championship?
For the college football playoff?
Yeah.
Same as it ever was.
Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, BYU with an outside shot, Texas A&M with an outside shot.
I agree with everything you said, except for that last team that I'm not going to mention because I think that there are teams that are better than they are.
You think they get it over Florida?
And I can't mention their name either, but they're one of the teams I think that's better.
Yeah, I think Florida's better than A&M. I think
A&M beat them at the beginning of the year.
I just think A&M's lost Alabama. It's going to be far enough down the road where it really won't impact them. But again, they're an outsider. I mean, things got to happen for the Aggies to get in there. But right now, they're playing really good football. And really, it only matters what you do in November and in the championship game for that committee. What you did in September, or I guess the first week of October, is kind of forgotten about. They'll look at it on a piece of paper, but they won't remember the details. And it's what you do in November and how you go. It's how they do in the NCAA basketball tournament. If you have a great February, but you sucked in November, December, and January, you're going to get an at-large bid more or less because of the body of work in the last part of the season. So that's kind of how I look at it with the committee. But it's the same four teams that have been in the top four right now. And the only way I can see neither one of those four teams not being in there is a collapse, or if Clemson Notre Dame meet in the ACC title game and Clemson loses, that might be enough to have BYU or Cincinnati sneak in.
To me, I think Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson are locks. I think Notre Dame is my question mark because I'm going to circle the game 2 weeks from now against Carolina. It's at Kenan Stadium on November 27th. I think if a team is going to upend Notre Dame, it's going to be Carolina there. I don't like Carolina on paper. I think Carolina is a team that I don't know. I don't think they're as good as they say they are. But I think if Notre Dame loses to Carolina there, that is the opening. That will allow, I think, a Florida to go in over an A&M just because of the known commodity, that the fact that Kyle Trask is in the Heisman hunt, Kellen Mond is not. I think there's some arguments to be had there. But, yeah, I think Notre Dame or one of the other ones have to lose again for even having to even give one of these teams a shot like a Cincinnati or a Brigham Young. But I think, that's not going to happen going forward because the schedules are soft for a lot of these teams.
All right, J-Dub. When the Golden Helmets show up at Keenan, you and I need to be there because I don't know if I've seen a bigger football atmosphere, anticipated football atmosphere in Chapel Hill than that one.
Come on down.
And I got to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
15 years of being intimate with the ACC and with Carolina football. I got to see that.
I'm 10 miles from Keenan Stadium, so come hang out. It's Thanksgiving Saturday. Let's have a good time and represent OSG North.
Guys, we did have one college football coach lose his job this week, and that would be Gary Anderson with an E, who was let go at Utah State.
Yeah.
The Aggies had dropped to 0-3 on the season. It's his second go-around at Utah State. And all of a sudden, we got a coaching opening, the first of many to come here. We talked about it a little bit in the first half of the show about some coaches who might be feeling their seat get a little warm.
Yeah, this is a guy that left Wisconsin because he and Barry Alvarez could not stay in the same room together.
Yeah, right.
And he goes back to a place where he had success at Utah State. And I just think he can't get the players he used to be able to get in Logan, Utah.
Yeah.
And 0-3, they let him go. And, I think Utah State thinks they're a better program than that. They're going to go after some young assistant to give him a shot. But if you're a young coach that looks for a head coaching opportunity, Logan, Utah is not a bad place to start.
Right.
And the co-defensive coordinator, Frank Maley, is going to step in to be an interim head coach there. So the Aggies are looking for their 28th coach in program history. Yikes.
It's a stepping stone.
Yeah, it is.
To say the least. Guys, you got anything you want to talk about here before we wrap things up on this episode?
Well, let's congratulate North Carolina for winning the Victory Bell. They rang it nicely, and they're painting it Carolina blue, obviously. And let's congratulate TCU for taking the saddle.
Yeah, shout out to Gary Patterson and company. A nice win.
One thing I will mention, I was watching an interview with Jim Harbaugh yesterday. How he said, yeah, we're 1-2, but we're really close.
Oh, God.
We're really
close to what? Close to what?
Falling off the cliff.
But that phrase, I'm like, could you be any more ambiguous? Really close to losing your job? I still think I'll say every week that Jim Harbaugh is one of the most overrated coaches in football.
Who really wants the Michigan job?
Yeah.
Now, I can't say anybody. Hugh Freeze?
That's one that's going to come with a price tag, though. You can buy yourself a decent coach at the level that they're going to be talking about. And there are guys out there that'll take it for the money that they're going to be willing, the Wolverines are going to be willing to pay. And I met with stunned silence on that one.
Michigan.
Do you pick off the Nick Saban staff?
Of course.
Who doesn't?
Sarkisian?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You bring Sark into the discussion.
Could be interesting.
And don't forget about a thundering herd. Conference USA undefeated, 6-0.
Yeah, they're there. And welcome back, Maction, by the way. 3 of the games on Maction Wednesday went over the total. I know that surprises people.
Return to the Mac.
Take the over.
Yes, take the over. And actually, I think it was 4 of the 6 that were over. Toledo Bowling Green had 41, Miami, Ohio, Ball State 69, Central Michigan, Ohio U 57, Buffalo and Northern Illinois 79, 71 with Western Michigan and Akron, and 50 with Kent and Eastern Michigan.
Zips.
Welcome back, Maction.
You want some action? Take the over. Make sure you tip your waiters and waitresses, everybody.
Exactly. Are they playing 8-man football in the MAC right now? What is going on?
Tackle optional.
Of course, Bowling Green only scored 3 points. So
yeah, they brought everybody down. They brought the mean down for the first week into the action.
We won't talk about Bowling Green. I've still got scars.
Yeah. Inside story. Keep going, Phil.
Yes. Looking through the schedule next week, guys, there's Ohio State at Maryland could be an interesting game, potentially, if Maryland keeps playing like they have been.
Ohio State by 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's not going to be pretty. Not going to be pretty.
I would have to agree with you on that one. in a normal season, Alabama and LSU would be the big talker this week. I'm thinking not so much this year. LSU is just really not good on defense.
Oh, is Bo Pelini done?
Yeah, and Alabama is extremely good on offense.
So Najee Harris will run for 5,000 yards in one game against that LSU defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, Devontae Smith will probably catch for about 250 yards. And Wisconsin, assuming that they are able to play this week, could be putting another nail in the Jim Harbaugh coffin as they square off at the Horseshoe.
I'll allow it.
Big house.
I'll allow it.
I mean, the two games on my radar this week, you got to talk about Northwestern Purdue. I think that's going to be a big game. I think they're playing in West Lafayette, so that'll be an interesting game. And I'm also I've got my eye on. Sorry, John. I've got my eye on Auburn, Mississippi State. Both of these teams are down. To see what's going to happen here. I know the Pirate got a win last week, but it's against Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
To see what's going to happen there.
They had to come back.
It was ugly.
But I think when's the last time Alabama LSU was not a game on our radar to watch, right? I think it's correct. And then you got Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman, Coach of the Year. He's my vote for Coach of the Year going into Gainesville. Ben Hill Griffin. We'll see what happens.
I'm looking at Notre Dame and Boston College because look, BC is a much better team. And if they play 4 great quarters against Notre Dame, BC could upset things in the national title picture. And I don't think BC would love anything more than to disrupt the Notre Dame national championship run. Because that's our two schools that when they get on the football field, they get after it.
I love Jeff Hafley.
The battle for Catholic supremacy, and that could be a trap game very easily for Notre Dame coming out of a tough emotional win over Clemson.
Another trap game, Miami, Virginia Tech. I think Vatech could be a trap game for the Hurricanes.
No, not if we're losing Liberty. I think Derek King runs wild in that game. It may be a high-scoring shootout, but I'd take Miami in that one. Guys, what do you say we wrap up the show?
Let's wrap up the show.
Wrap it up.
For those of us who haven't heard the promos at this point, as we wrap up the second block of the review, find us on social media at OSG Sports, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. We're there. Look us up. Really easy to find. We have a phone app. It's free. It's the OSG Sports app that John so often shows us on video. If you're listening to the podcast, obviously you can't see it unless I put music underneath it and all that other miracle of radio.
And we got it with the giggles before the show ended.
Yes, and podcasting-wise, we're on Spreaker, our host network, and a slew of other places, including the Apple Store, Google Play, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, all the most popular podcast apps.
And basically everywhere.
So for OSG J-Dub, OSG Nelson, and Jay Wilkerson 16, I am OSG Phil. You have been listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.